Thank you. The next candidate may begin when they're ready. R2. Thank you. Candidate G5 may begin when they're ready. Thank you. Candidate T11 may begin when they're ready. Thank you. I'd like to invite candidate X10 to begin when they're ready. We're hearing too much background noise. Can we please request lower sound? Thank you. I'd like to invite the candidates to rename themselves to preserve their anonymity. We can actually take a moment and all do that perhaps. And when you've done that, you're welcome to turn your cameras on. I'm going to rename the orchestra committee member, and I'm going to introduce him as well. Congratulations, everyone. I thought there was some really good playing tonight. I hope some of you felt uncomfortable, because if you did, then we're doing something right here. We have a very special guest who was loaning us his ears and is about to share some of his insights. He's the newest member of the National Symphony Orchestra in Washington, D.C. He currently plays in the San Diego Symphony, and we've worked together for many years. Erin has been on committees of mine for mock auditions, and I chose him. You know, Erin has a really rich background and with auditions, with playing professionally, and a long history of just kind of excellence over time, dedication to music festivals that he's played in, Tanglewood, Schleswig Holstein, and Erin and I both went to Carnegie Mellon as well. Now, Erin, there's something else about him you should know. Erin is a percussionist, and there's a reason. This is very intentional why I asked Erin to be here. Some of you may or may not know that typically on our committees, there can be members of other instrument families on our committee voting on whether we advance or don't advance, voting on whether we get the job or don't get the job. People who are non-flutists. Sometimes there aren't even any flutists on our panel. So I am especially intrigued by Erin's musicianship as a non-flutist. This is why he's here tonight, to help us think outside the box, think about what other musicians are listening to on the panel. And Erin, thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure listening to each one of you play. I heard some really incredible things. Yeah, like Diana said, I've been in San Diego for 9 years now. Before that, I studied at Carnegie Mellon, and also I did my grad work at Temple in Philadelphia. And yeah, most recently won the position for assistant principal percussion in the National Symphony just a couple weeks ago, actually. So yeah, I think it's great that each one of you is doing this program, because something that I maybe took for granted or didn't realize how special it was that kind of environment I had when I was in school, because I won the job in San Diego actually while I was in grad school, and kind of something like a little different for me was getting back into taking auditions after being out of school and having a job, or I mean whatever kind of life situation you're going to end up in. I know, you know, everybody's kind of at different stages in their career and different stages in their education, and that kind of like the it's almost like a forge, like an iron forge, when you're in an environment like this where there's a lot of pressure, yes, and there's a lot of, you know, other people. You have a lot of colleagues that are playing well, and you're kind of constantly surrounded by this really incredible energy and dedication, and it is very different from when you're out. I mean, even out here for me, having the job is a totally different environment. It took me a while to kind of be able to I guess, be intentional about putting myself in those situations where, for example, most recently Zoom mocks, because we haven't had as many people in person. Diana has sat in on many, as has her husband Eddie, and also kind of speaking on what Diana was saying. It's always helpful for me as a percussionist to have non-percussionists on, like, listening to me and giving me feedback. For example, my committee for the audition in DC was, there was 3 percussionists on it, but it's an 8-person committee. So there's, more than half of the committee is instruments that are, not going to know maybe everything about percussion. They're not going to know the little minutia. They're not going to know the difference between, like, well, like, how does a xylophone speak, or like, is this normal, or those kinds of things. And it's really valuable to get the input of people that play different instruments, especially, like, even going as far as, like, for having me listen to you. I'm going to listen and hear very different things than maybe a flute player would. I know when I listen to other percussionists play, I'm listening to excerpts that I've played a million times. I'm listening to all these things that it's really hard to kind of just sit back and listen to the sound someone's creating or the music someone's making. And that's something that I enjoy about being able to listen to other instruments, is because I have not actually sat on any audition committees here in San Diego. And hearing all of these things are very new to me. And, like, maybe I've played some of these pieces, but you don't, haven't listened to these excerpts by themselves, or maybe nearly as like closely scrutinized.
And in my experience, Erin, that's quite common. Like, these committees are comprised of people who don't play our instruments. They don't know our excerpts. They've maybe played the symphonies several times in their professional lives, but they're kind of coming in just fresh. And that's exactly why Erin's here. A quick anecdote, just to put Erin, to embarrass him a little bit and to share what I think my students will love hearing. I was told that the principal flutist of National was on Erin's committee.
Yes, he was.
It was shared with me that Erin's final round of this audition was the best final round he'd heard of any instrument in his entire career. Have you heard that yet, Erin?
I had heard that, actually. I can't remember who.
I'd hoped you had.
Somebody told me. I forget.
Harrison told me. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. Great. So word is out that Erin is a total badass, and in case we didn't know, flutists can hear it too. So let's move into, if we can, a little bit of a discussion. I just, what I'm really curious about is, like, can you tell us, okay, here are just a few ideas, and then you can pick up on any of these that you're interested in. I want to know, like, how many hours do you practice a day to feel like ready to win an audition? When you were listening tonight, were there any like consistent red flags that you were like, oh, I really don't like hearing this in flutists? I just realized tonight.
Yeah. Yeah. So for my approach, well, we can start there. I practice now. When I was getting ready for the NSO audition, I was probably putting in about 4 hours a day, maybe 5 if I had nothing going on that day. Really, I kind of, over the past 9 years or so, I've learned to kind of transition from the way you practice in school versus kind of the way you have to practice when you're outside of that environment. Because when you're in school, you kind of have as much time as you could possibly ever imagine. And one thing that I learned is I didn't actually have to practice nearly as much once I got out of school and as my career kind of got along, because this is actually something that principal of the NSO, the principal percussionist, mentioned to me is that like auditioning and getting ready for these auditions, it's a cumulative process. It's not like you're starting from scratch for each audition that you take. And however you do in an audition is not necessarily, it does not determine how well you're going to do in the next one. But what does make a difference is your the amount of times you play these excerpts, the amount of time you spent practicing, like that doesn't go away. And I think sometimes it can feel like it does. And a lot of times we kind of tell ourselves that, oh, like I'm getting ready for another audition, I have to start, from square one. And that's not always the case, because if you think of all the time, like you don't have to put the same amount of hours into an excerpt that or an excerpt that you've practiced a lot. I mean, to get it back to where it needs to be. And I think that's something to learn as you get older and as you mature as a musician, is kind of taking stock of, well, like what have I done? Like how far have I come since, grad school or since undergrad or high school or, wherever you're starting from, and just kind of viewing everything as the broader picture. And the other thing that really helped with my preparation was this idea that, while you're going into this audition and for you guys as flutists, or flautists, I'm not sure which one it is. Obviously, that all the flute players on the panel are going to know the excerpts that you're playing, but there's a whole lot of other people that don't, or that may not know them very well, or someone like me. And something that really comes across more than anything to someone that doesn't know these excerpts is confidence. And I think that's one of those things that you can't really tell someone how to sound confident. It just kind of, but it when you hear it. And it's one of those things that something that really helped with my overall level of confidence is instead of approaching an audition as this, as being judged, which is, I think, a lot of times what it's how we feel when we're prepping for an audition, and maybe even when you're stepping out there to play, you have this idea of being judged by the people on the other side of the panel. But that's not kind of the whole situation. Something that really helped me is if you go in there with the idea that you're presenting, a masterclass on these excerpts, or if you were, presenting a business plan to someone, you would present it from the position of like, this is my business plan. I've done all this work. I know all the ins and outs of it. And there's a level of confidence in someone that knows exactly how to tell people, what they're trying to say. And if you go into your auditions, I mean, any auditions, festival auditions, mock auditions, just practicing going in and standing on that stage and having the mindset of like, I know these excerpts better than anybody on this panel. And that's probably true because, even the people playing your own instrument haven't been practicing the way you have. So kind of that knowledge of like, I mean, I'm sure all these people, they could play these excerpts this well, but they haven't been working like I have. And like, this is my chance to like really say, like, look at what I can do. And that, and kind of going in with that attitude and that thought of, this is what I have to say about this music. And I know, like, and being confident in the way you're saying it, that's something that also kind of accumulates over time. It's really hard to have that early on because maybe you don't have like anything to look back on of like, this is what I've done. But you can kind of fake it for a while. And just playing for people and having an idea of, if, for example, when you're doing a mock audition and I think recording yourself is great, but also if you think you played things well, and you get feedback that, people really liked what you played, listen to that more than maybe the little minutia in your recordings. Because if what you think, I guess what I'm trying to say is if you're able to, produce an excerpt in a way that feels good and feels like the way you want to do it, and people are, and you're getting kind of positive feedback and it feels right, then I think that's a better thing to kind of lean on and listen to, rather than, maybe a recording where you're, picking apart your own playing. I think that was something that really helped me, just kind of having a little bit more of a broader picture of your own playing as a whole, as opposed to each excerpt, as a minutia, or each excerpt as a, its own thing separate from everything else that you're doing. What was the second question, Diana?
I don't know, but I do know that my students are brilliant, thoughtful people. And I think it would be a
Yes.
great time for them to come to the fore if they have any questions about maybe, anything. I was thinking, is there anything about the flute that you heard tonight and you were like, oh, that bugs me? Or
Oh, um, nothing that really bugged me. There was, and forgive me, I'm not sure who was who at this point, but I know there was just like different tone qualities that I heard that maybe I wasn't expecting, or maybe I didn't know were possible on the flute, and those were like, those are little things that I noticed, and maybe it, in and of it, like isolated, I wouldn't necessarily have been able to pick out that as like better or worse or anything like that, but in a group of 5 people, I was able to notice certain ones that were like different. And I think that's something to think about, that if you can do something in your playing that maybe makes you stand out, or maybe there's a certain character that you give an excerpt that even if nobody else does it, or maybe, I guess, I don't necessarily know if there's right or wrong ways to do things. I'm sure there's different interpretations of ways of doing things. But I mean, as long as you're kind of doing it with conviction, I was able to tell when there was a really nice color change, or when there was a character like change in an excerpt, or going from one excerpt to the next, they felt different, like not necessarily different flute players, but you could tell that the sound changed to fit maybe a romantic or a modern piece, or a classical piece. That was something that I was able to notice.
that's wonderful. I thought of something. We have about a little less than 10 minutes left with Erin.
Hmm.
So I just wanted to ask, um, have you experienced rejection? We're hearing about these sort of glorious jobs that you're in and that you're going into. Maybe for some of us, it would be nice knowing what kind of resilience you might have had to demonstrate
Yeah.
over time.
All sorts of resilience, on a macro scale, like the 2 auditions I took before the pandemic hit. I actually didn't even finish my first round. I got cut off before I finished my prelim round. That was very disheartening. And so recently, as a week before I took the NSO audition, I found out that I was runner up in Baltimore, and did not get that position, which I'll be honest, I was feeling very good about it, and I really felt like I was going to win that job. And then a week before the NSO audition, I found out that I didn't get it. And the one thing, like rejection like that, it's important not to see it as a personal rejection. They're not rejecting you as a person, or even as a musician necessarily. I think the thing to kind of look on it is, if you can look at your round. For example, when I got cut off in the middle of the round, I knew exactly what I did. I wasn't happy with the way I was playing. Like, I didn't need to kind of pick it apart and say like, well, what happened? Like, I knew what happened. I didn't execute the way I wanted to. But in Baltimore, I executed exactly how I wanted to. They just liked, they felt like the other person was a better fit. We actually had trial weeks and everything. It was a very long process. And that rejection felt a little bit different, because it was very, like, the thing you'll feel about your playing is, as you make it farther on in auditions, use that as kind of confidence and like affirmation that, okay, like what I'm doing is correct, or what I'm doing people like. I think the time to maybe get introspective and maybe search for other opinions is if you feel like you're doing everything you can and you feel like you played around perfectly and you didn't make it, that's kind of when it's time to look at your playing and think, well, maybe there are things that I'm not noticing.
That's really, really helpful. Do you still get nervous ever, or is that just you don't
uh,
get nervous?
I do. I take beta blockers, which helps. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It doesn't make you a better musician. Um, it just makes you more capable of doing what you already can do. And I get nervous for every audition. I've taken, I got nervous for my trial weeks in Baltimore. I mean, I think you just learn to accept the fact that you're nervous instead of trying to fight it. I think a lot of us, we kind of fight that feeling, and you can't just like will yourself to not be nervous anymore. But what you can do is kind of accept that feeling and learn to like have it with you and not have it impact you in the same way, because you actually spend more energy fighting trying to be nervous by like maybe controlling all these little things in your brain. But I mean, you can control your breath, you can focus on the things that you can control, and you can just kind of like the best thing is to just kind of get used to that feeling, because it's always going to be there. And the more you can play nervous, the better you'll get at playing nervous. I mean, even for me, like I'll record mock auditions just by myself, and I actually get more nervous when I put my own recording device on, because I know I'm my own harshest critic, and I don't even need to listen to the recordings to really get the full value out of that experience, because it's all just getting better at playing nervous.
Did you take, like, if you gave us, you could be specific or general, whatever you're comfortable with, but approximately how many auditions have you taken?
Well, San Diego was actually my fifth audition, and I had a very good day. I think that was a very different stage of my life. I was very young. I was 23, and I think not necessarily in over my head, but I had a lot to learn about the job when I got there. And I think what did it for me on that day was just this, like I kind of went out there with nothing to lose because I was still in school, and I managed to kind of put all that together into a really good day. But between that audition and the NSO, I think I've taken probably a dozen, at least a dozen, in the past 7 years. And I've come close in a couple of them. I've not even come close in a lot of them. Kind of, I guess, results all over the place, which at the end of the day, I was able to kind of like after each one, if I felt really good about my playing, usually I made it pretty far. If I didn't feel good about the way I played, usually I didn't make it very far. So in that respect, it was kind of easy to accept the results, because if I wasn't happy with the way I played, and I didn't get through, then I wasn't surprised or I wasn't disappointed. I didn't feel like, I deserved to, maybe. And actually some of the times that I did the best is almost when I didn't feel like I did so well, and then I still did advance, because that feels very affirming of like, oh, I still have wiggle room and I have room to grow here.
That's wonderful insights. Now, opening it up to the class. Any questions for Erin? Now's your chance. Putting you all on the spot here. Does
Oh
anyone
no.
have anything they can think of?
Hi. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you notice anything in the way you prepared for the auditions that you ended up having more success in versus ones that you had less?
Yes, I would say the auditions that I had more success in, I was um, less neurotic in my approach. Um, there was a couple auditions, most famously the audition in Philadelphia, I went to grad school in Philadelphia, and kind of both of my through all like my years of schooling, the Philadelphia Orchestra was kind of the one that I listened to all the recordings, and it was kind of like my dream job, as it were. And I just really got kind of sunk into this idea of like thinking I had to play a certain way, and I was getting really neurotic about my practicing, and really just like overworking myself. Um, and sure enough, I didn't even finish my prelim round. Whereas auditions that I've done better are the ones that I've been able to kind of manage my um, it's not even that I changed the way I practice. It was more my mental health was much better through the whole thing, and I didn't allow myself to kind of go down the rabbit hole of micromanaging my playing and nitpicking myself, and pushing myself too hard. Just kind of trusting what I know how to do.
Mental health wise, last question. Do you have any
Yeah.
tips or apps or
Uh,
relaxation things or therapists?
well, my wife's a therapist, so that was very helpful. But honestly, the biggest thing um, that helped me the most was kind of um, doing some work with this thing that's called ACT, which is acceptance and commitment therapy, which is a whole thing. And for those of you with if you're seeing a therapist, I recommend looking into that, or at least talking about it. There's some nice workbooks. I was actually working on an ACT workbook at the time, and it was basically just kind of the crux of it, without getting, I am not a mental health professional by any means, but it really helped me kind of what I had mentioned before, just accept a lot of the things that I was feeling. And instead of spending so much time and energy like fighting this idea of who I thought I should be, or who I, thought other people wanted me to be, or all these, like, there's so much kind of happening around us in this world of professional music, and just kind of learning to connect with what I wanted to do as a musician, who I wanted to be as a musician, and just kind of accepting like all the other feelings that go around with that. Like, it's okay to really want a job, and tell yourself, I really want this job. You're not going to be less disappointed with a result if you try telling yourself you don't want a job. Like that's a big thing to think about. And just instead of like fighting these emotions the whole time when you're getting ready for an audition, just like spending time with them, and allowing yourself to feel whatever you're feeling in that moment. And so like if I was having a bad practice morning, instead of like pushing through it and like really bearing down and like burying this negative feeling, maybe I would like sit down or like go on a walk. And if I was feeling angry, I would like feel a little bit angry, and then allow that feeling to kind of move through me, instead of just sitting on it and letting it fester. So
Wow.
yeah.
That sounds really amazing. And I will certainly be Googling this as soon as
Yeah.
this class is over.
Yeah.
Thank you, Erin. Oh my gosh,
Yeah, you're welcome.
you've been so generous with your time. We're gonna let you
Yeah,
go
of course.
tonight. I really want to thank you on behalf of the class for joining us, for
Yeah, of
sharing
course.
your really wonderful insights. I think you're such a thoughtful person, and it's been really lovely
Thank you.
spending this hour with you. So we're going to
Yeah,
connect in
it's my
San
pleasure.
Diego soon. You should all come hear us play in San Diego.
Yeah, that's right.
Erin will be doing the holiday pops. I'll be doing the Nutcracker production, but we'll be down there and we'll be
Yeah.
hanging out. So come
Yes, we
take a
will.
field trip. And Erin, I'll look forward to seeing you
Yeah,
pretty soon.
likewise.
Yeah, thank you.
Likewise.
Good night.
All right.
And everyone else,
Bye,
stay
guys.
here. Bye, Erin.
Bye.
Everyone else, I just wanted to say a couple things. I am, so thankful for all of you, and just wanted to mention, of course, this is our last studio class of the term. It's been a full 10 weeks since we began, and I'm not sure how you feel, if that feels like a short amount or a long amount. What I am aware of is that there's been a lot of work that's gone on in the last 10 weeks. It's been a very, very intense period. And especially for those of you who are actively auditioning or preparing for things like pre-screenings, there have been a lot of pressures compounding one after the other. So, man, just Erin speaking about mental health sounds really timely for us going into this holiday season when there can be continuing stressors and pressures, especially the pressure to be happy. And, many of us struggle at this time of year. So I just want to say it's wonderful to focus on taking care of our mental health, our physical health, and flute is a part of the spectrum of what makes us who we are. It is not the sole identity that we have. And I think you're all brilliant, wonderful flutists, by the way. And you're also complex people with other interests and lives. So I really want you to continue nurturing those and working really hard at the flute. And you've come to the right place. You're getting this. I just want to toot my own horn for a sec because I continue to be so passionate about the value and complexities of this program. Being together every week, playing every week live is something I never got to do during my undergrad or my master's. I would play much more occasionally. Playing for 2 guest artists every 10 weeks. Absolutely not. Maybe 1 or 2 guest artists a year in my schooling days. Having a teacher review recordings as well as hear me live is something I never experienced. If Jeannie Backstresser had heard 1 recording of me ever, I think I would have learned a lot from her. So I just want to thank you for, all the ways that you're participating and showing up and being organized for our lessons, submitting optional daily forms, whether you feel ready to or not, showing up for your accountability partner, giving and receiving feedback. These are all very valuable things that I know are contributing to the improvement and the changes that I've heard since day one. So please listen back to your first studio class of term. I know each and every one of you will hear at least one thing that you have taken charge of and transformed in this time. Incremental progress over time leads to great outcomes. We can't control when those outcomes happen. It's not linear, as Erin was describing, but if you persist and continue to show up, I really believe in the power of the process that we're in. And I've seen it happen again and again. So thank you. All of you are continuing next term. We may be in different studio classes, the way things shake out, depending on availability, but certainly we'll be enjoying seeing one another. January will be here before we know it. And I just want to say thank you and happy holidays. This Sunday, we have a very important event. It is the final recital, the final studio recital. This is very important to me that we're all there to support one another and kind of share the excitement of the work that you've done preparing this fully memorized recital. So I'll see you on Sunday at 12 noon for that event. And I hope you found tonight interesting and helpful. I think that Erin wrote comments for everyone. I'm going to touch in with him to see about getting those out to you. But now that I've promised that, I hope that's true. That was my impression of what he was doing. But I think regardless, there's been a lot of helpful information shared. So thank you all. And that's all I got. Have a wonderful evening. Good night.